What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and you know why you're here. We got some more Guilds of Ravnica spoilers for you today, and there was some good stuff in this morning's batch. Nothing as crazy as Assassin's Trophy, but some good stuff nonetheless. So let's go ahead and get to it. First, some limited playable stuff as usual. Here's Blade Instructor. It's 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 3/1 human soldier with Mentor. Now, to me, the most notable thing about this card is that she looks exactly like Pink to me, but that's just me. This is a 3-power creature with Mentor, which is actually kind of relevant, but it's only got 1 toughness, so it also kind of is terrible. So we'll go ahead and move on. Actually, quick final thought before we move on. Mentor is looking like, by and large, the weakest of these guild abilities this time around. Now, in context, we haven't really seen any of this set, to be honest. So there could be a great Mentor card waiting to be spoiled, but so far, I'm just not liking this mechanic as a whole. Okay, now on to the next card. Here's Artful Takedown. It's 4 mana, 2, a blue, and a black for an instant. Choose one or both. Tap target creature and/or target creature gets -2/-4 until end of turn. Now, we saw a few of these modal spells today. It's a cycle for each of the guilds, and some look much better than others. We'll look at another one here soon in this video that is definitely going to see a lot of standard play, but I won't put this one in that category. 4 mana is a lot for a removal spell, especially in a format with Vraska's Contempt, which is just a much better removal spell. If you're going to pay 4 mana for a spell like this, you just play Contempt. Although I do like the idea, in a control deck especially, of, when your opponent announces their attack step, you just tap down that guy and kill this other guy. Like, that seems like a fine play, but again, 4 mana is just way too much. Now, in Limited, you'll play this every time you pick it up, and it is a common, so you're likely to pick up multiple copies of it at the pre-release or in draft. So, in Limited, this is a fine card. This is a very fine card, but I don't think it has any constructed playability. We'll see, but I really doubt it. But up next is Ionize. I like this card a lot. This is 3 mana, 1, a blue, and a red for an instant counter target spell. Ionize deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. Now, I'm putting this in the limited playable category because apparently I'm the only one really excited for this card. I've seen a lot of people call this card bad today on various message boards and stuff. And I don't get it. I like Undermine, I like Counter Squall and stuff like that. So I like this card a lot, especially for an Is It control deck or a Jeskai control deck. I could definitely, I've always liked Counterburn. Let me just put it that way. Counterburn is an old school archetype that hasn't been viable since, like 1998? It's been a very long time, but cards like this really hit the nostalgia, button for me. They make me feel good. And I really want to play this. Just put it that way. I want to make Is It Control with shocks and lightning strikes and ionizes like a real thing. So we're going to give that a shot. Could make for a good budget deck, but I'm excited that this card's in standard. I think it actually does have some form of playability. I think 3 mana hard counters are okay, and in some decks, this is going to be even easier to cast than, say, a Sinister Sabotage or similar 3 mana, 2 blue counterspell. So for certain mana bases, I could see this working better than traditional hard counters. So I like this. I'll go on record as saying I like this, but I will temper my expectations because everybody else seems to have done that. Up next, here's District Guide. This actually looks really good. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 2/2 elf scout. And when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land or a gate, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. Now, this is the first of the gate-centric cards that we saw today. Gates are officially back. We knew they were, but we saw all their new arts and stuff today. And we even got a brand new gate. We'll look at that next. But this is just a Civic Wayfinder that is just better. It's just strictly better, as far as I can tell. It puts the land in your hand. You can go get a basic if you want it. And you can also just go get a gate, which is going to be extremely good, I would imagine, in the limited environment, where you're probably going to end up with a lot of gates. So I'm actually a huge fan of this in Limited, if nothing else, but maybe, possibly even in Constructed, where, Wayfinder has seen play in multiple standard environments, and this is even better. If you're playing gates, I don't know that you will be, especially in a format with shocks and check lands, but on the off chance that you're playing a gate or two, this can go search it up for you. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm a fan, and I think that it maybe has fringe standard playability. But up next, as promised, here's Gateway Plaza right here. It's a land, gate, and it enters the battlefield tapped, as gates tend to do. And when it enters the battlefield, you sack it unless you pay 1, you tap to add a mana of any color. So it's a Rupture Spire. It's a strictly better Rupture Spire. At least there's that. It's got the gate typing, which just technically does make it strictly better, but it's still just a Rupture Spire. which probably doesn't have a whole lot of, impact on Standard or anything, unless there is a Gates deck to play in Standard, which at least on a budget level there probably will be, so it'll go in a deck or two this season on the channel. But if nothing else, this does give, casual and even modern Gate players, apparently they do exist, seriously, another Gate, which means that you can lose a Gate. You can get a Gate blown away and never get it back. And still win the game off of Maze's End. So that's cool. And a lot of people want to see Maze's End reprinted because of all the Gate action today. I'm not sure that we'll actually see that. But there are still, apparently, according to internet comments today, very many Gate players in the world, whether casual or, again, there purport to be some modern Gate players. And this gives us another Gate, which is actually somewhat important, or at least it appears to be to them. But the big Gate payoff today is Guild Summit. This is 3 mana, 2, and a blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you may tap any number of untapped gates you control. Draw a card for each gate tapped this way. And whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. So maybe this is what we're supposed to do with Scapeshift in Standard. Probably. I think, if you have like Scapeshift and Tatiova, you can just end up drawing all of the cards. Get a Reliquary Tower from your Scapeshift. Make sure that'll keep you safe. But in any case, maybe this is what we're supposed to do. Just use Scapeshift to bring a bunch of gates into play, draw 5 cards. I could see that happening. I was going to say working, but I don't know if I could see it working, but I could definitely see it happening. Now, we also saw Beast Whisperer. This is the newest card today, as of this recording at least. It's 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a 2/3 elf druid, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card. Now, as far as Standard playability, I'll get out of the way real quick that I think this is miles away. 4 mana is a lot. This usually just eats a lightning strike or another removal spell. It has to actually live, to draw you any cards. It has to usually live at least 1 turn if it's going to draw you any cards. However, this can draw you 2 or 3 cards the turn after you play it, so it doesn't look awful. And it's also an elf. Should point that out too. We've seen a fair amount of elves, we've looked at an elf already today. This is an elf. Imara's an elf. There's been a few elves. So if that's relevant, that's relevant. And obviously this is pretty good in an elves deck where you're playing a bunch of creatures every single turn anyway. So I could see this having some Standard relevance, but probably very, very little in the long game. But all that stuff I said about elves really matters for casual and EDH play. But here's a much better 4 mana green creature, at least by my measure. This is Nullhide Farox. It's 2 and 2 green for a 6/6 beast with hexproof, but wait a second. You can't cast non-creature spells. And pay 2, Nullhide Farox loses all abilities until end of turn. Any player may activate this ability. And if a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Farox, put it onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. Okay, so it's got the Loxodon Smiter ability. Which is maybe actually kind of relevant in a format where Nicol Bolas looks like it's a really powerful card and Grixis is a pretty decent mana base. So I actually think this could be very playable. It's got a pseudo hexproof, which I don't necessarily like. This is basically just like all your opponent's removal spells against this thing cost 2 extra mana. So that could be okay. Assassin's Trophy costs 4, making it a fair removal spell. Vraska's Contempt costs 6, making it a bad removal spell. And I really like the design here for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you can pay 2 mana as well and, target it with auras or cast whatever non-creature spells you need to cast at any given point. And if your opponent, by the way, uses its ability to target it with removal, then now you're free and clear to cast any non-creature spells to protect it at their normal rate. So I like that about it too. I think it competes a bit with Vinemare in the 4-drop slot for green decks, but it's entirely possible that a deck with 4 Llanowar Elves and like maybe 4, Mana Dorks at the 2-drop slot can just play 4 Vinemare and 4 this and you just guarantee a big hexproof creature they have to deal with on turn 3 virtually. And definitely on turn 4. So I really do like this card, and I think that it definitely has a shot at Standard playability. A very, very undercosted 6/6 that almost has no downside. Almost. In a creature deck, you're not really playing too many non-creature spells anyway. Like if you built, sort of soft built around this, then you could play a deck that only plays a couple or 0 non-creatures. And so this card has literally no downside. 4 mana for a 6/6 that taxes their removal. And if they somehow make you discard this, it also has upside in that realm too. Like everything about the card is good. So I think the card is relatively pushed and could see Standard play. Did I just talk forever about that card? I think I may have. I'm sorry if I did. But anyway, here's Kibbes Inside. It's 4 mana, 3 and a blue for an instant. Draw 2 cards, and it's got Jumpstart. Simple and beautiful. Easily the best Jumpstart card that we've seen so far. This will replace Glimmer of Genius and Hieroglyphic Illumination, whatever, in control decks for the next couple of years. Probably. It's really, really good, you know. It does cost a total of 8 mana to draw 4 cards, but you'll take that. In a control deck, you'll split that between turns, you know. This works really well with Surveil. If you Surveil this into your graveyard, that's totally fine. You won't actually end up getting card advantage off of it, but it's good selection, good filtering in that case. You know, you get rid of this card in your hand and you discard a card for 2 fresh cards, which control decks will still take every single day, you know. I really, I just can't stress how much I like this card. Again, best card with Jumpstart so far, and I actually don't have that much to say about it because it's just so obviously good for control. But up next, let's look at Deafening Clarion here. This is 3 mana, 1 a red and a white for a sorcery. Choose one or both. It's one of these cards. Deafening Clarion deals 3 damage to each creature and or creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. This card's good. You know, this is another one I feel like I want to have more to say about, but it's just so obviously standard playable. And we'll probably see all the sideboard or maybe even mainboard play because there's almost no reason not to play this card. You know, I really like that aggro decks now get a sweeper, if they want one, that is also just pure upside on the other mode. Maybe they got off to a good start or we got off to a bad start, in which case this card is a great reset button. Or maybe we just choose both modes. And, you know, we have a creature or 2 that survives, at which point we just put the game well out of reach. So I like everything about how this card plays. You know, it's either a normal sweeper, which we want, you know. We have typically wanted 3 mana red sweepers that deal 3 damage since Anger of the Gods and Sweltering Suns and now this. So it's just for that alone, this is a playable card. But the second mode on it makes it really good and probably, you know, tempting to break. Let me just put it that way. But check out Goblin Crater Maker here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Warrior with 1, sacrifice Goblin Crater Maker and choose 1. Goblin Crater Maker deals 2 damage to target creature or destroy target colorless non-land permanent. What an awesome goblin this is, you know. This could actually see modern play because obviously this is another card that's good against Tron. Eldrazi Tron specifically. But Tron nonetheless, you know, and this will take out Ether Vials and stuff against other modern decks. So maybe, possibly modern play. And if standard goblins is a thing, then definitely, you know, even though the 2-drop slot is looking a little bit clogged up in that deck, but this will probably, you know, fit right in. This is another thing that can blow up artifacts, and just like Trashmaster can. And it can blow up Karns, which is probably pretty important in and of itself, you know. And I haven't even talked about the blow itself up for 2 damage to a creature. That could also be pretty relevant too. So again, another card that I like literally everything about, and it's just pushed to the gills, you know. 2 mana for a 2/2, a bear, that's at least a fine rate, but when you have a bear with this much upside, you really got to start paying attention. And let's keep it real, by the way, although a lot of people are talking about this card for Goblins deck specifically, I actually don't think it has to go into a Goblins deck. It's a fine 2-drop by itself. You know, it's a hate bear, and hate bears are very good, and this is a very versatile one. This can take out creatures, it can kill artifacts, and other colorless permanents for that matter. So I just think this card has an awful lot of play on it, Goblins or not, and it's probably going to see a lot of action. But here's Runaway Steamkin right here, the Johnny card of the day. It's 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 1/1 elemental. Whenever you cast a red spell, if Runaway Steamkin has fewer than 3 +1/+1 counters on it, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And you can remove 3 counters from it to add 3 mana to your mana pool, 3 red mana. This is a fairly difficult card to evaluate, if I'm being honest, but there are really cool things about it. But I'll start with the things that some people seem to be missing about the card. First of all, it's whenever you cast a red spell. This is the most missed thing about the card, which means that not only when you cast instants and sorceries, but also when you cast creatures, enchantments, literally anything that's red, period. So that makes the card a lot better than some people are reading it. There's also the fact that it won't get any more +1/+1 counters after it gets to be a 4/4. People are missing that too. Keep that in mind. But another thing people are missing about this, it seems, in all the, you know, ramp and combo posts, is that this is a 2-mana creature that can get to a 4/4 pretty fast. That part's actually really relevant looking to me, at least. You know, on turn 3, in a mono red aggro deck, I hate to bring up the boogeyman here, I think we're all sick of mono red, but in a mono red aggro deck, you could play this on turn 2, and then turn 3, play, maybe a 2-drop creature and a shock, or a couple of 1-drop creatures and a shock, maybe even just, a 2-drop and a 1-drop creature. And at that point, you've got a 3/3. You pay 2 mana for a 3/3 that will get bigger as the game goes on. So just in terms of pure stats, this has the chance of getting actually pretty big for its mana cost. This also seems at least decent alongside the Flame of Keld, which supports the mono red aggro theory with this card. But I haven't even talked about the ramp aspect yet, which is obviously relevant. We just did a mono red ramp deck, a Jaya Ballard deck, the other day, and this could slot right in and do a lot for you. Attack for big chunks of their life total, make your burn plan a lot easier to execute, or even just block for you when you need it to. This is a fine 2-drop for that deck, because eventually it'll help you ramp into Fight with Fire and Banefire, Jaya Ballard, all that stuff. So I can see this being really, really good in a deck like that and various combo decks. But that's just it, I'll finish up with this card by saying that, I don't think you have to get too weird with it to actually make it work. It doesn't have to go too far to be a good card. In a mono red deck, this is, a card that both lowers the land count while simultaneously being a potentially big 2-drop. So there's just a lot of good about this card without really trying to break it too hard. That said, actual final thought on this card is that if you're on the draw in the mirror match, you probably don't want to be playing this card, because you'll play it on your turn 2, they'll go and drop Chain Whirler, and look what just happened. So there are definitely arguments against it, but I think especially on the play in a fast red deck, this is a fine card. But we've only got a couple of cards left today. Here's Izoni Thousand-Eyed, which it sounds like it comes from Kamigawa to me, but it's 6 mana, 2 black, and 2 green for a 2/3 legendary elf shaman. Another elf, look at that. And it's got Undergrowth. When Izoni enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token for each creature in your graveyard. But that's not all, kids. It's also got black, green, sacrifice another creature. You gain 1 life and draw a card. I'm not convinced that I want to pay 6 mana for this, but I will reanimate it. What I'd really like to see is a good reanimation piece to replace Liliana's Death's Majesty. We've got the Eldritch Reborn, but it's really, really slow. I'd want really a 4 mana, but I'll even take a good 5 mana, hopefully Planeswalker, that has a decent reanimation, ability on it. I think that's a lot more desirable than paying all 6 mana for this. But in a heavy creature deck that's aristocrat-centered, I think there are definitely ways to get this out more quickly. I guess Song of Freyalise and just Mana Dorks is a good idea in and of itself. So there's that. But you also want to be able to dump cards in your graveyard. So you get Stitcher's Supplier and some other cards that do that. I just think that the construction on this might take a second, but there are definitely ways to break this card in Standard. That said, if I'm paying 6 mana for a Golgari card, I'm probably going to play Vraska instead. This is relatively sensitive to cards like Cleansing Nova, Settle the Wreckage, stuff like that. So I'm not I want to be a bigger fan than I actually am. Although, again, I am somewhat excited about the card because I really like that Enter the Battlefield trigger. And I like cards like this that pay off a deck building theme so well. Sometimes this is going to bring 8 to 10 power or more into play. And if we get an ability to just let you flip your library into your graveyard somehow, which is a thing sometimes, in various ways, then this could actually be a really desirable 6-drop. Again, and you can reanimate it, you can cheat it into play through ramping. There's a lot of ways to get this, and I haven't even talked about the last ability on the card yet. I really wish this drained their life, but I will always take a drawn card, especially at relatively low cost of 2 mana. That is pretty good, and it gives you all the creatures in the world when it enters the battlefield to sacrifice to its ability. So this is pretty sweet. I don't think it's the Aristocrats engine that we want because it costs 6 mana. But even though it does cost all that mana, it brings with it its own army of little aristocrats, so it could be playable. But here's the token producer I want to talk about, and actually my favorite card of the day. This is March of the Multitudes. It's X, a green, and 2 white for an instant with Convoke. Create X, a 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. Now this is awesome as far as token producers go, and I like what they did here because it's reminiscent, sort of Sphinx's Revelation. Instead of drawing you cards, it gives you creatures. They tack Convoke onto it. In case you didn't notice there, I kind of went through it really quickly. But they tack Convoke onto it. But, you know, it still has the chance of gaining you as much life as you put into it as well, just like Sphinx's Revelation, because all those guys have lifelink. So I think this is a Selesnya take on Sphinxes, and I think that's sly and cool from a design perspective. But I really want to talk about the actual playability of this card because I think it's real. Now, I spent like 2 hours last night brewing with this card because this actually got spoiled late last night. But I was so excited about the card that I immediately took to the notebook and went in the lab and ended up, you know, drawing up some things with this because there are a few things you could do. Obviously, if you just went Selesnya, you have choices. Again, I'll bring up Song of Freyalise. That card exists, but you could play, you know, Llanowar Elves as your 1-drop, maybe some other mana dorks if you wanted to. Now, the card does have Convoke, so it sort of, you know, mitigates how good mana dorks are in helping cast this, because your creatures can help cast it regardless. In that case, you might want to go mostly white 1 and 2 drops. We've got Dauntless Bodyguard, Sky Marcher Aspirant, Legion's Landing, Leonin Vanguard. There's no shortage of white 1 drops that you could play to help get this card as big as possible, as early as possible. But that's just one way of playing it, and that's the way a lot of people are talking about playing it, is in these, you know, tokens decks. Some use the 2 mana, you know, make 2 Saplings card. Most of them play a bunch of 1-drops, or at least that's the preliminary builds that people are, you know, cooking up right now. But I actually don't know if that's the right way to play it. I like this as a control finisher. Maybe Abzan Control could play this. It too gets access to Assassin's Trophy, so, you know, Vraska's Contempt, Settle the Wreckage, Seal Away. You could make a pretty good Abzan Control deck right now, and this could be a great finisher for you. Unlike the last token-producing card we saw, this can get around Cleansing Nova. Just play it at the end of your opponent's turn, you know. It can even get around Settle the Wreckage. You know, wait till they tap out and play it at the end of their turn. So there's that. Or it can get around Settle the Wreckage by just making you a bunch of tokens, and you only swing with half of them. That's another way of getting around Settle. And I like cards like this that produce a bunch of tokens right now because they're good against Assassin's Trophy, which is going to be in a lot of decks. So I think there's a lot of reasons to go wide in Standard right now, and this is probably the best way to do it. And again, as a control finisher, it seems decent, but it could even be, I've talked about an aggro deck, a control deck, it could even be in a mid-range deck. You know, a deck that plays anywhere between 18 and 22 creatures, that also plays a bunch of spells, could take really good advantage of this. So I just like this in a multitude of different decks right now. I think it has a lot of play in Standard. It kind of reminds me of Secure the Wastes. I like that about it too. You know, you can play this during your opponent's combat step to block them, blow them out. You know, it's almost a fog if you've got enough mana. I like that about it. It can even leave guys behind and gain you a bunch of life. That's all of that's good. And it snowballs. You might want to play 4 copies of this because they get incrementally better, exponentially better, really, after the first one is played. You know, the first one will give you more tokens to tap for the second one. Second one will give you more tokens to tap for the third one. So it just gets better and better. The more copies you have. So this card is bonkers looking to me, and I hope that it's an important part of the next metagame because I've been brewing with it for the last 20 hours or so. I did not get much sleep last night. That's how much I wanted to mess around with this card. It just looked really, really crazy to me. But whew, sorry I talked about that one forever, but again, I brewed with it for a while last night. So you know, I have a lot to say about it. I think that card is really, really crazy. But in any case, let me know how you felt about all these. I'm tapped out. I'm going to turn it over to you. It's your turn. Let me know how you felt about the spoilers today. What are you most excited for? Am I too excited for March of the Multitudes or any of these cards? Because I was pretty excited about a lot of stuff today. Tell me why I'm wrong about Ionize, all that stuff. And tell me what I'm wrong about in the other direction, too. You know, if I crapped on a card, which I don't think I did too much today. But if I did, let me know why I'm wrong in that direction, too. But in any case, make sure you subscribe to the channel for all these spoiler videos. They're really all coming down the pipeline now. It's going to be this way for the next couple of weeks. So sub to the channel, hit the bell for the notifications to make sure you get these videos. Check out my sponsor, TCG Player, where you can already pre-order a lot of stuff from this set. You can already get Assassin's Trophy and all the Chase Rares they've previewed so far. All this Gate stuff for your Gate deck. I want to go ahead and pre-order that. You know, boxes right now of this on pre-order right now are going for like $92, which will go up. You can get $92 with free shipping on TCG Player right now if you wanted to pre-order any sealed products. So do all that stuff. Hit the first link in the description to go over to them and check them out. And if you want to, throw $1 in the Patreon. I'll let you know what videos we're doing the day before we do them. I'll let you know when spoiler videos are about to come out. And you can participate in polls and stuff to, you know, let me know what decks I should even do first in this next season. So a lot of value for $1. Join the Patreon if you got the Skrilla. It really helps out around here. Aside from that, pretty sure that's about all. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. Like and share the video so everybody gets in on the spoiler action. And I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.